The rain had been falling for hours, soft and steady, tapping against the glass walls of the rehabilitation centre like a lullaby no one wanted to hear. Inside, Charles Grant sat perfectly still, one hand resting gently on the armrest of his daughter's wheelchair. His other hand clutched a coffee he hadn't touched in over an hour. Emily hadn't spoken much that day, but then again she hadn't spoken much in months. A year ago she was dancing, floating across stages, lighting up rooms with a smile and a pirouette. Now she couldn't move her legs, couldn't feel them, and the sparkle in her eyes had faded like the posters of her old ballet performances still clinging to the walls of her room. Charles used to fix things, that's what he did, built a tech empire from scratch, outthought competitors, outworked everyone. When investors panicked, he stayed calm. When markets crashed, he rebuilt. But now he just sat, watching the one thing he couldn't rebuild slowly slip away. Therapist after therapist had come and gone. They all started the same, hopeful, enthusiastic. Then a few weeks in, they'd lower their voices and avoid eye contact. Eventually, they'd just stop showing up. Money wasn't the problem. Charles had more than enough of it. Connections weren't the problem either. He had access to the best, but none of it mattered. Not here, not now. Today was supposed to be the start of yet another new approach. Some therapist from out of town, another recommendation, another maybe. Charles didn't look up when the door creaked open. He expected a clipboard, a white coat, a firm handshake and some overly cheerful voice saying something like, "We're going to turn this around." Instead, he heard the soft scuff of worn boots and a child's laugh. "Sorry," a man's voice said. "He doesn't really do quiet entrances." Charles turned, and what he saw made him blink. There, standing by the door, was a man in faded jeans and a jacket that had clearly seen better days. No name tag, no badge, no official anything. And beside him was a little boy, maybe 6 years old, holding a sketchbook, one sock slipping halfway off his foot. Charles raised an eyebrow. "Are you lost?" The man smiled, easy and calm. "Name's Adam," he said. "And this is Eli, my son. Heard about your daughter. Thought I might be able to help." Charles narrowed his eyes. "Help? You a therapist?" "No, sir," Adam said simply. "Not officially. I used to be a medic. These days I just help where I can." Charles didn't answer right away. He looked at Emily. She hadn't moved. But her eyes, those tired, quiet eyes, were watching the little boy, just watching. That was the first flicker Charles had seen in weeks. He sighed. "You have 3 days," he said flatly. "If she doesn't respond, you leave." Adam nodded. "That's fair." And just like that, the man no one expected pulled up a chair. The little boy started sketching on the floor. And for the first time in a long, long while, Emily didn't look away. Adam didn't bring any equipment, no clipboard, no therapy schedule, no motivational posters. What he did bring was a pair of old sneakers, a backpack that squeaked every time he shifted in the chair, and a calmness that didn't feel forced. He sat across from Emily, not hovering or trying too hard, just there. Eli sat on the floor near the window, humming softly as he coloured in his sketchbook. Every few minutes, he'd glance up at Emily with a crooked smile, then go back to scribbling little stick figures dancing under a tree. Emily didn't say anything, but she didn't look away either. Charles watched from the corner, arms crossed, trying not to let his irritation show. This wasn't what he expected. No physical evaluations, no stretching or motor tests, just a stranger talking. "I'm not here to fix her," Adam said quietly, breaking the silence. "I just want to remind her she's still in there." Charles didn't reply. He didn't believe in words without action, not anymore. Adam leaned back, balancing his chair on 2 legs like a teenager would. "You know," he said, looking at Emily, "Eli was born almost 3 months early. Doctors said he might never walk, said he might not even make it." Emily's eyes flickered, just barely. "I didn't know what I was doing," Adam continued. "We didn't have much, just a tiny kitchen, a speaker that barely worked, and a floor full of cracks. But I'd play music, sing the dumbest songs you can imagine, and we'd dance. Well, he'd try, I'd hold him up, and he'd scream the lyrics louder than the melody." Emily blinked. Charles noticed. Adam smiled, but didn't push. "We kept doing it, day after day, until one morning I turned around to grab a towel, and he followed me. Tiny steps, wobbly as hell, but they were his." Outside, the rain had slowed to a whisper. Inside, something quieter than sound filled the room. Emily wasn't crying, but her breathing had changed. Slower, deeper, present. Adam stood. "That's all for today. I'll see you tomorrow, Emily." He didn't wait for a response, just patted Eli's head, grabbed his backpack and walked toward the door. Charles followed. In the hallway, his voice dropped. "You're wasting your time," he muttered. Adam didn't flinch. "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes the things that don't make sense on paper are the only things that reach the heart." He gave Charles a small nod, then disappeared down the hall, his boots squeaking with every step. And back in the room, Emily stared at the sketch Eli had left behind. It was messy, crayon everywhere, but in the centre were two stick figures, one in a wheelchair, one dancing beside her. Emily didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. The next morning, Emily was already awake when Charles walked into the room. She didn't say anything, but she was sitting up straighter than usual, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the door, as if expecting someone. Charles noticed, said nothing, just took his usual seat and opened the tablet to check emails he didn't care about. A few minutes later, the door creaked open, and in came the familiar shuffle of Adam's boots and Eli's giggles. "Morning," Adam said, like they were old friends meeting at a coffee shop. He held up something behind his back. "I brought a gift." Eli bounced in with a half-blown yellow balloon. "A balloon?" Charles asked, half sceptical. Adam grinned. "The most underrated physical therapy tool on the planet." He walked over, gently set the balloon on Emily's lap, then crouched beside her. "No pressure," he said softly. "Just see if you can pop it with your knee." Emily stared at the balloon. Her expression didn't change. Adam waited. "Your brain remembers," he whispered. "Even if your body forgot. The trick is getting them to talk to each other again." Eli started humming a little tune and began bouncing side to side. It wasn't a song Charles recognised, just something simple, silly, light. The kind of tune that reminded you of sunshine and bare feet. Emily didn't move. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Adam never said a word. He just sat cross-legged on the floor, watching with the patience of someone who had done this before. Charles was growing restless. "Maybe this isn't..." "Just one more minute," Adam interrupted gently. The balloon sat perfectly still on Emily's knees. And then right as Charles was about to stand up, it rolled off. Not because of her, just gravity. But Adam caught it mid-air, gave her a wink and placed it right back. "We'll try again tomorrow." Emily blinked. Charles exhaled through his nose, annoyed but strangely unsure why. As Adam and Eli packed up, the little boy turned to Emily and handed her another drawing. This one showed 3 stick figures this time, one in a chair, one dancing, and one holding a balloon. She held it in her hand longer than the first. That night, Charles sat alone in his office, staring at a folder labelled "Emily's Case, No Progress." He closed it without opening it, and instead of pouring a drink, he walked down the hall and did something he hadn't done in months. He knocked on his daughter's door, sat on the edge of her bed, and began reading aloud from the old dog-eared book she used to fall asleep to. She didn't say a word, but she didn't turn away either. Day 3 started the same way, quiet grey skies outside, coffee gone cold inside. Emily sat by the window, blanket tucked around her waist. Charles was scrolling through his phone, but not really reading anything. Just after 9 o'clock, the door clicked open. "Knock knock," Adam said, holding 2 breakfast burritos like peace offerings. One's got bacon, the other's a mystery. Eli rushed in behind him, beaming. He waved a tablet at Emily. "I made a playlist." Charles glanced up. "Playlist?" "Of course," Adam grinned. "Every healing journey needs a soundtrack." He set the tablet on the windowsill. The speakers weren't great, a little tinny, but the moment the first song played, the air in the room shifted. It was a goofy pop song, bubbly, childish. But Emily's head turned, just slightly. Eli grinned, recognising the flicker of recognition. "My dad says dancing starts in the mind before it ever hits your feet." Emily didn't answer, but her fingers twitched, just a little. Charles noticed, so did Adam. "You like that one?" Adam asked gently. "We can play it again." Eli tapped the screen, the song started over. This time, as the beat picked up, Emily's gaze stayed locked on the tablet. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes... They looked different, not just awake, but present. Adam knelt beside her again, careful not to crowd her. "Let's try something," he said, pulling the balloon out of his bag. He set it gently on her lap. "Just a little tap, doesn't have to be big." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, almost like a breeze through grass, her knees shifted. Just barely, but enough. The balloon trembled and rolled off. Adam caught it again, but this time he didn't say anything. He just looked up at her and whispered, "There she is." Emily's face stayed still, but her eyes, They were full of water, not crying, not yet, but close. Charles's throat tightened. He stood, walked to the hallway and leaned against the wall like he'd just run a mile. Adam joined him a moment later, handing him the burrito. "I know you don't trust me yet," he said, "but I saw it. You did too." Charles didn't speak, but he didn't throw the burrito away either. Back in the room, Eli was already drawing again, this time a stick figure with sparkles around her legs. Emily looked down at her own, still quiet, but maybe, just maybe, not silent anymore. That evening, after Emily's small but unmistakable breakthrough, Charles didn't go back to his emails. He didn't make calls, didn't check stocks. Instead, he sat in the hallway outside her room long after Adam and Eli had left, listening to the low hum of the vending machine and the soft tick of the hallway clock. Eventually, Adam returned. He had a paper cup of coffee in one hand and Eli asleep on his shoulder, his small arms wrapped around his father's neck. "I didn't expect you to still be here," Adam said softly, adjusting his grip on the boy. Charles didn't look up, couldn't sleep. Adam nodded. "Yeah, that happens when things start to change." He slid down the wall and sat beside Charles, resting Eli gently on a folded sweatshirt, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. For a moment, neither man said anything. Then Charles broke the silence. "You're not just winging this, are you?" Adam gave a small smile. "I mean, I don't have a degree on my wall, if that's what you're asking. But no, I'm not winging it. I've lived it." He nodded toward Eli. "That kid was in the NICU for 90 days. Could barely breathe without help. I memorized every beep of every machine in that place. Nurses thought I was nuts, but I wasn't going anywhere." Charles studied him. "You're a single dad?" "Yeah," Adam said, sipping his coffee. "His mum left before we even got a diagnosis. Said she couldn't handle the idea of raising a kid who might never walk." Charles's eyes dropped to the floor. "I've had people walk away too," he murmured. Adam looked at him, not with pity, but understanding. Funny how the strongest people are always the ones sitting next to a hospital bed at 2 a.m, doing nothing but staying. Charles let out a breath he hadn't realised he was holding. "You know," Adam said, glancing toward the room, "when Eli took his first steps, it wasn't in therapy. It was in our kitchen. I was making grilled cheese. Music was playing. I dropped a pan, turned around, and there he was, wobbling toward me like a drunk penguin." Charles laughed, not loud but real. "Point is," Adam continued, "the body heals when it's ready. But the heart, that heals when it feels safe. That's what you're giving her now, whether you realise it or not." Charles turned to look at him. "What if it's too late?" Adam shook his head. "It's never too late for someone to feel seen again." They sat in silence for a few more minutes, two fathers who had come from different worlds but somehow landed on the same bench. And when Eli stirred and reached for his dad in his sleep, Charles glanced at the boy, then back toward his daughter's room. Maybe healing didn't always look like a procedure. Maybe, sometimes, it looked like being there and staying. The next morning, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Not much, just a sliver through the blinds, but it felt different. Emily noticed it, so did Charles. She had asked, quietly, almost in a whisper, to have the window opened a little. It wasn't much, just 5 words. "Can you open the window?" But Charles nearly dropped his coffee. It was the first thing she'd said to him in over 4 months. He didn't ask her to repeat it, didn't question it, just stood, walked over, and opened the window like it was the most important thing he'd ever done. The air smelled like grass, like new beginnings. A few hours later, Adam showed up with Eli and something else. An old portable speaker duct-taped at the back. "It's not pretty," Adam said, setting it on the floor, "but it's loud." Eli grinned. "I made a dance playlist for today." Charles stood in the doorway, arms crossed but not in resistance. He was watching now, really watching. Adam placed the balloon on Emily's lap again. "Same goal," he said gently. "Just a little tap, that's it." This time, instead of silence, music played. A beat pulsed through the room, one of those feel-good songs that didn't need lyrics to make you smile. Emily's fingers tapped against the armrest, just once, then again. She closed her eyes, her knee twitched, then again, and the balloon rolled off. But this time it wasn't an accident. Charles stepped forward, almost afraid to breathe. "Emily," he said, voice cracking, "did you just—" She nodded. Adam smiled. "Told you, still in there." And then the moment no one expected, Emily laughed. It was soft, barely more than a breath, but it was real. Eli clapped like he was at a concert. "She laughed," he shouted. "She really laughed." Emily looked at him, her eyes shining, and whispered, "Thanks for the music." Charles had to turn away for a second. Not because he didn't want to cry, but because he was already crying. and he didn't want to miss a single second of what came next. The next few days passed in quiet rhythm. No big breakthroughs, no dramatic leaps, just small things. Emily holding the balloon in place with her knee, moving her fingers to the beat of a song, asking for the window to stay open, laughing once in a while at Eli's ridiculous dance moves. To anyone else it might not have seemed like much, but to Charles it was everything. Then came Wednesday. Adam arrived without the balloon this time. No games, no gadgets, just his usual quiet confidence and a folded gym mat under his arm. "You ready?" he asked Emily. She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Adam grinned. "Something a little different today." He laid the mat across the floor in front of her chair. It looked ordinary, soft, blue, nothing special. But Charles felt his chest tighten. "Wait," he said, stepping forward. "What exactly are we doing?" Adam looked at him. "We're giving her the chance to try." He turned to Emily. "We're not forcing anything, just leaning into possibility." Emily hesitated. Her hands clenched the armrests of her chair. "You don't have to," Charles said quickly. "Only if you want to." She didn't speak, just stared at the mat. And then slowly, carefully, she nodded. Adam helped her move to the edge of the chair. His movements were steady but gentle, like he'd done this 100 times. Charles hovered behind, afraid but too emotional to hide it. "Okay," Adam whispered. "Feet flat on the mat, I'm right here." Eli held his breath. Charles forgot to blink. Emily's arms trembled. Her legs didn't move much, but her core tightened, her jaw clenched. And then, with Adam bracing her shoulders and Charles supporting her waist, she stood, not straight, not steady, but upright on her feet. For the first time in almost a year. Nobody said anything, not right away. Charles felt his knees buckle. He knelt slowly beside her, hands shaking as he reached for hers. "Emily," he whispered, voice breaking, You're standing." Emily was crying now, silent tears falling onto her cheeks, her breath unsteady. "I forgot how tall I was," she whispered back. That was it. Charles couldn't hold it anymore. He wrapped his arms around her, carefully, gently, and sobbed into her shoulder. He wasn't a CEO in that moment, not a billionaire, just a father, just a man who thought he'd lost everything, and suddenly realised he hadn't. News travels fast. By the end of the week, nurses from other wings were poking their heads into the rehab room, pretending to check equipment, just to sneak a look. Emily, once the girl they whispered about in past tense, was now standing, inching forward, gripping parallel bars with shaky but determined hands. And smiling. That smile alone could have lit up the entire building. Charles watched her during each session, arms crossed tightly across his chest, like he was holding himself together. But inside he was a mess. He'd seen miracles on screens. He'd built things people called impossible, but nothing, not IPOs, not billion-dollar mergers, not magazine covers, compared to the moment his daughter took 2 full steps without help. He didn't clap. He cried. Later that night, when the hallway was quiet and Emily had fallen asleep exhausted but proud, Charles found Adam sitting alone on a bench outside the centre. Eli was asleep in his lap, a half-eaten granola bar still in one hand. "Got a minute?" Charles asked. Adam looked up, surprised. "Of course." Charles handed him a plain white envelope. "There's a check in there. You can fill in whatever amount you want." Adam didn't take it. Charles cleared his throat. "You changed her life. You deserve something for that." Adam stared at the envelope for a long time, then smiled. Soft, patient. "She did the work. I just reminded her it was still worth trying." Charles held the envelope out again. "I owe you more than I can say." Adam's smile faded, but not out of coldness. He looked down at Eli, asleep against his chest, then back at Charles. "You want to do something for me?" he said. "Give him a future." Charles blinked. "What do you mean?" Eli's smart, curious. He asks questions I can't always answer. He deserves chances I couldn't buy, even if I worked 3 jobs. Charles slowly lowered the envelope. "You want a scholarship?" Adam shrugged. "A school where he won't be overlooked. A place that sees what I see in him." There was no pride in his voice, just honesty, just a dad doing what any dad would do. Charles didn't hesitate. "Done?" Adam nodded once, then looked away. "I'm not good at accepting help, but I'm trying to get better at it." Charles sat beside him. Same. They sat there for a few quiet minutes. 2 men from very different worlds, now tied by something deeper than money. And in that silence, Charles realised something. He had built companies to change the world. But Adam changed people, one life at a time. And that was priceless. Emily walked 6 steps that Friday. 6 wobbly, uneven, breath-stealing steps, but they were hers. When she collapsed back into the chair, breathless and shaking, Eli clapped so loud the nurse down the hall jumped. "You crushed it!" he shouted, holding up his hand for a high five. Emily smiled, wide and tired. She gave him a weak but proud slap of her hand. "I almost fell over." Eli shrugged. "Falling means you're trying, that's what my dad says." Charles was standing in the corner, trying to keep it together. He had taken to watching quietly now, no phone, no laptop, no distractions. Just him and his daughter, rebuilding something they both thought was gone. That afternoon, when therapy ended, Eli pulled a folded piece of paper from his backpack. "It's for you," he told Emily. "I drew your future." She opened it carefully. The crayon drawing showed a stage, a girl in a yellow dress dancing, and stick figures in the crowd clapping like crazy. "I'm not sure I'll dance again," Emily said softly. "You don't have to," Eli replied, "but I think the world would be better if you did." Emily blinked back tears. Later that evening, Charles called Adam into his office. It wasn't the usual corporate setting, just a cosy corner of the rehab centre where he'd claimed a desk and some quiet. "I've been thinking," Charles began. "What happened here, what you gave us? There's got to be more families like ours out there. People who've run out of money, or hope, or both." Adam nodded cautiously. Charles leaned forward. "Let's start something. A foundation. Not another donation machine, not a PR stunt. Something real, something that reaches the ones no one sees." Adam looked at him for a long time. "What would it be called?" Charles didn't even pause. "The Emily Project." Adam smiled. "You sure she'll be okay with that?" "She already said she wants to help," Charles said. "She told me she doesn't just want to recover. She wants it to mean something." Adam let out a breath and sat down across from him. "Okay," he said. "Let's make sure it does." And just like that, something new was born. Not out of strategy, not out of money, but out of grace. Out of one girl's fight, and the stranger who reminded her she was still worth saving. 2 months later, Emily walked through the doors of a local community centre. Not with perfect balance, not without effort, but with purpose. The room was small, a circle of kids, a few parents, and an old speaker in the corner playing soft background music. Charles stood in the back, arms crossed, not out of formality, but pride. Emily stepped to the centre, took a breath, and smiled. "I'm not here to teach you to dance," she began. "I'm here to remind you that movement isn't just about muscles. Sometimes it starts with memory, sometimes it starts with pain, and sometimes it starts with a person who refuses to give up on you." A few parents wiped their eyes. One of the kids in a wheelchair raised his hand and asked, "Did it hurt?" Emily knelt in front of him and said, "Yes, but not nearly as much as thinking I'd never feel joy again." The class clapped, the music played, and for the next hour Emily led them, some standing, some sitting, some unsure, but all trying. Afterward, as she packed up, a woman approached her quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. "My daughter hasn't smiled in weeks. Until today." Emily smiled back. "That was me, not long ago." Outside, Charles waited by the car. He handed her a folder. Inside was a list of new applicants for the Emily Project. Kids, veterans, parents, names from towns Charles had never even heard of. She looked up at him, surprised. "They heard your story," he said, "and they want to believe again too." Across town, Adam and Eli sat in a little kitchen that smelled like burnt toast and old coffee. Eli was drawing again. This time, a big building with a sign that said, "A place where people get back up." Adam smiled, ran a hand through Eli's hair and said softly, "That's exactly what it is." He didn't need recognition, or interviews, or money. He just kept showing up quietly, patiently, wherever hope felt thin. Because sometimes the greatest healers don't come wearing badges or carrying degrees. Sometimes they walk in wearing faded jeans holding a child's hand, and they say, "Let's try one more time."